We'll get to Fairmont State University political science professor Robert Bolton. We'll talk to him on the other side of the break. 9:15. Hope your Monday's off to a great start. Back in a moment.
Join the conversation at 1-800-765-8255. This is the Talk of the Town.
Metro News statewide correspondent Brad McElhenney, bottom of the hour. So while I'm enjoying baseball, taking it easy, I wasn't really taking it easy. I was working, despite erroneous reports. Former President Donald Trump was convicted up in the New York hush money trial. Joining us now for more is a friend of the show and Fairmont State University political science professor Robert Bolton. Robert, good morning.
Good morning, Dave. Glad to be back on.
Glad to have you. First of all, just from historical context, this is a major deal that a former president is convicted in a court of law. We'll get into the specifics of this case, but it's historical from the context. Robert, it's nothing like this has ever happened before. We are in totally uncharted territory.
You're absolutely right, Dave, with the one exception of back in the 19th century, Ulysses S. Grant got a speeding ticket while he was president. There's been no occasion, to the best of my knowledge, that a current or former president has ever faced any type of arrest or criminal conviction in U.S. history.
And he's going to be the Republican presidential nominee here in 6 weeks or so. So all of this is just we're breaking new ground here, Robert.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens, not only in regard to the sentencing for him, but how this conviction will impact the general election.
So, first of all, the legal process that will play out from here. I believe sentencing is scheduled for July 11th. I guess that would be the next step in the process?
That is likely to be the next step in the process. We'll have to see what the judge in this case, Juan Merchan, imposes as Donald Trump's sentence, whether or not Mr. Trump will face any type of jail time, any particular type of fine. But assuming whatever that penalty may be, Donald Trump will then have, as a matter of right under New York law, the ability to appeal his conviction to the next level of the New York State Judiciary, which is the appellate division in Division 1 of New York, which encompasses Manhattan. And then after that, he can take it further, and if he wants to, he can appeal it to the New York Court of Appeals, which is the highest court within the New York State Judiciary. His other option is he could appeal it directly to federal court and argue that there's some federal law claims here, but because the underlying basis for his conviction was an alleged violation of federal election law. So he's got a few different options that he can allow to play out in the next stage of these proceedings, but it remains to be seen what he and his attorneys decide to do.
Do any of those options get resolved before November?
Absolutely not. Under no circumstances do I see. You may see an appeal occur to the appellate division and them issue an opinion before November, although I think even that is unlikely. But as a practical matter, the appeal process for this particular case is nowhere near done. I could easily see this dragging on through the entirety of 2024 and possibly the entirety of 2025. It's also important to remember that Donald Trump has 3 other pending legal cases, and at this point, there is no realistic chance any of those 3 criminal cases would go to trial before November. So this was the one and only one that you'll see before November, and depending on the results of the presidential election in November, at least 2 of those 3 cases may very well be dismissed if Donald Trump is reelected as president.
Well, that was going to be my next question, Robert. If we'll just play the hypothetical situation now. If he is elected in November and assumes the office next January, Where does this leave this case? I mean, does this case still play out as if he's regular citizen Donald Trump?
Well, there are a couple of different issues that are at play here. If Donald Trump is reelected in November, if he manages to defeat Joe Biden, and in the polls right now they're pretty close, although Donald Trump in the key battleground states is slightly ahead, although I don't really give much credence to polls that are 4 months out from an election or 5 months out from an election. If he is elected as president, he could order, once he is sworn in on January 20th, that his attorney general fires Jack Smith, who is leading the two federal cases. In regard to the two state cases, the one in New York poses some interesting federalism questions. Can a state manage to prosecute a federal official and potentially even incarcerate them when that official is the chief executive officer of the United States? No one has ever encountered this situation, so it's hard to say, but I expect that the federal courts will ultimately get involved and rule on that matter if Donald Trump is elected as president. In regard to the Georgia case, just a few weeks ago, the trial judge in that case, Scott McAfee, said that the prosecutor, Felony Willis, was not required to recuse herself due to her relationship with the special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, in that case. Donald Trump and his attorneys are currently appealing that before the Georgia Court of Appeals, and then if they receive an unfavorable ruling, it could go to the Georgia Supreme Court. But in that case, if ultimately one of the appellate levels rules that Ms. Willis should have been forced to recuse herself, it will go to a special panel that decides who would be the Georgia prosecutor in that case. And there have been other cases currently pending before that Georgia panel related to the 2020 presidential election that they haven't assigned a prosecutor for well over a year. So it's very well conceivable that that case could be dead in the water. But the last thing to remember is if Donald Trump is elected president, he could theoretically pardon himself on any federal conviction or dismiss the case, but this state conviction still stands.
Robert Bolton joining us. He's a Fairmont State University political science professor. Got about 2.5 minutes here, Robert. Just wanted to get your take. Joe Manchin, back in the news Friday morning, switching to independent for his final 6 months or so in Congress or in the Senate. What do you make of this move?
Well, there are really only two potential meanings behind this. Since Joe Manchin has already declared that he's not going to run for president and he's not going to run for re-election to the United States Senate, the idealistic position would be that Joe Manchin is saying at the end of his time in office, look, the current two-party system in the United States is broken. They're not able to listen to each other, and neither party really seems to be concerned with the interests of the American people. That's the ideal perspective. And it's very well possible that may be Senator Manchin's intention. The other alternative possibility is that Joe Manchin is pivoting towards a run and a return to Charleston as governor. He has until early August to file as an independent for governor. So it's possible that you could see a three-way race between Patrick Morrisey, the Democratic candidate Steve Williams, and Joe Manchin as an independent, which, if that happens, it could certainly be quite the shakeup. Joe Manchin and Patrick Morrisey went head-to-head in 2018, where Joe Manchin managed to win re-election by a little over 3 percentage points. That was a very close race, and I certainly think Joe Manchin in many ways would be a stronger contender as an independent than he would be as a Democrat in West Virginia's current political landscape.
Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor. Always appreciate the insights, Robert. Thank you very much.
No problem. Glad to be back on, Dave.
Absolutely. Take care. Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University there.